Okay, I'm waiting notification. Boom. And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this afternoon. We have an incredible guest with us today, a reoccurring guest, a legend in his own right, the one and only Dr. Alim Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And on behalf of myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we thank Allah for you taking time out of your busy schedule to come give us some powerful information as well as inspiration. And before we get started, I just wanted to let you know, on behalf of myself and my family and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we extend our love and our condolences to you and your family on your mother. May Allah be pleased.
Thanks.
And we're sending positive energy your way, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The first question that we have for you, sir, is, first of all, how was your Ramadan?
Well, this Ramadan was spectacular, just as all of them have been. Now, this year, for personal reasons, and some of it having to do with the loss of my mother, I didn't personally fast. But if you look closely in the instruction concerning Ramadan, there are exceptions, and there are some people who shouldn't fast, maybe for health reasons or for other reasons.
Yes, sir.
But there's an option. You can feed the hungry.
Yes, sir.
And what is becoming increasingly clear as days goes by is that all around us, even some of our close associates and friends and neighbors, some of the believers, they're hungry right now. They don't have enough to eat. And we know that the government is cutting back. They used to call them food stamps. They call it something else now. But I think they cut that by 30% just recently. So people who were just barely getting by with enough groceries per month, nowadays, hey, there's a whole week that goes by, they have no food to eat. And so during the middle of Ramadan, my son, I don't know if you know my son, Kush. You know Kush, don't you?
Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, he's been doing an agricultural project, for the past year or so, maybe a little more than a year. And so they constructed what we call a hoop house. And this is in Capitol Heights, Maryland. And so he's been growing vegetables and that kind of thing all through the winter. The winter crop was kale and spinach. And they got 4 crops during the winter time. And this was a part of a program with the Capitol Heights city where they have a food program. Every Sunday, people line up at the city hall and it stretches around the block. And these are hungry people, working people. These are not, people, homeless. That's bad enough. But these are working people and they're hungry and they line up by the hundreds every Sunday. And, my son, he invited me to help do the harvest. And so we showed up with some boxes of spinach and kale. And the people were so glad to get some fresh food because mostly what they get at these food banks, it's canned things and that's better than nothing, but to have some fresh greens, as a part of whatever your diet is. So that was my Ramadan. It was spent feeding the hungry. And we should think more and more along those lines. Coming to current events, my last count showed that there were 110 food manufacturing plants in this country that have blown up or exploded or caught on fire in the last year or so. Most recently, down in Texas, there was an explosion at a dairy farm, and this one explosion killed 18,000 cows. Well, now, it wasn't so long ago where they were reporting that there was a shortage of baby formula, but the babies who were being fed milk, hey, they were okay. What about now? You see, so there's an attack against the food. And looking into the future, not only do we have these strange weather events that are affecting the growing seasons and you know, and you know, in the war over in Europe and all of that. But here you have people like Bill Gates talking about we're going to have 3D printed meat, you know, artificial meat. They're building artificial meat factories. Over in Europe, the European Union just passed a law saying that it's okay to feed human beings on bugs. So they're starting to feed school children in Europe, in Ireland, in Scotland, and other countries. They're feeding them crickets for lunch and mealworms and other insects. You see, so now this is the future. You see, in other words, in the Holy Quran, we're told, I think it's in Surah 16, verse 66, about the wonderful benefits and blessings of pure milk,
Yes,
you know,
sir,
the
yes,
raw
sir.
milk. But then the verses that follow that, I'm sorry, I can't quote it exactly, but the verses that follow the verses about milk say, and do not follow the footsteps of the devil. See, well, now we're talking about food here. So if you can look ahead and see what Bill Gates is talking about, what the European Union is talking about, and then you're looking over here and all of the food packing plants are exploding. Well, somebody's setting up the stage for famine so that you won't be able to get a good meal unless you grow it yourself. And so then that brings us to the reality of what we were taught called how to eat to live. You see, sometimes people misunderstand, and this is only a partial misunderstanding. See, we look at how to eat to live sometimes as a weight loss program. That's not what it's designed for, although it will cause you to weigh properly. Now, in my own case, I was thin as a rail when I came in the nation and started eating one meal a day. I gained 20 pounds overnight, which brought me to my correct weight because I was underweight. Other people, maybe most people, they're overweight. So when they start practicing how to eat to live, they lose weight. So they have the feeling like, oh, this must be a weight loss program. No, it helps you to weigh properly. But beyond that, what is it? It's a survival program. It's the means of survival on planet Earth at the present time. We were warned to get our mouth out of the white man's kitchen. Well, at the time that was spoken, that seemed optional. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. See, I was in the nation back in those days prior to 75. Do you know it was almost a sin for a Muslim in the Nation of Islam to go into a white folks restaurant? I mean, it wasn't forbidden. I mean, if you were traveling or you just had to, I mean, it had to be an extreme emergency for you to go into Cracker Barrels or the Red Lobster or any of those restaurants. We're not even talking about fast food restaurants. You might get 30 days out if you went in one. I'm not talking about the fast food places. I'm talking about any restaurant that wasn't run and operated by our own. See, that was part of how to eat to live. Now, bring that up to date. There is no way in the world for us to practice individually or collectively the full meaning of how to eat to live as a survival system on planet Earth without introducing agriculture. See, the foundational foods of how to eat to live, the raw milk, where are you going to get it? The whole wheat, where are you going to get it? The navy bean, where are you going to get it? Now, luckily, the enemy has not yet learned how to genetically modify the navy bean. So you can grow that by the tons without any worries whatsoever. Not so with the whole wheat. That's been so genetically modified. Nowhere inside of America, except one little place that I know of, can you buy non-genetically modified wheat. Normal, I mean, when I say normal wheat, I mean natural wheat, like the staff of what life that they talk about in the Bible.
Yes, sir.
We have never even seen that. You're in my generation, people are younger than us. You've never seen real wheat.
Mm.
Not in this country, not for a long time. Real wheat grows 6 feet high. So when you go past a wheat field in Kansas and Oklahoma and those places, that wheat is exactly 22 inches high.
Mm.
Genetically modified, they call it dwarf wheat. Genetically modified to grow exactly 22 inches high so that the mechanical combines can come through and harvest it in a very efficient manner. Well, what about the nutritional value of that dwarf wheat? Well, the nutritional value has dwarfed. See, back in the day, 100 years ago. See, that's a very convenient starting point, because we know, according to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that at this current time, we're in the year 15,109.
Go ahead.
So in 1914 was actually the year 15,000, according to the Asiatic calendar. Or it was the ending of the 6,000 year period of time given to the present world rulers to rule. So their rule actually was brought to an end in 1914. So if you look at the events that took place just before 1914 and at 1914 and just shortly after 1914, you see that all of the seeds of destruction of America had been set. So in December of 1913, in the Christmas holiday time period, there was the creation of 3 un-American government agencies. The Federal Reserve Bank, which confiscated all of the wealth of America. So if you want to bring a country down, what's the first thing you must do? Get control of the purse strings, get control of the money.
Mm.
So in 1913, America lost control of her money to the Federal Reserve Bank, which is owned by foreigners. The second institution that was created in 1913 was the IRS, because the foreign bankers that were now running the money system in America, they were intending to bankrupt the country, which means that they were going to increase the debt as the years went by. And in order to collect the money from the citizens, in other words, to rob the citizens, you had to have an agency like the IRS, which is a private corporation, to go rip off the American citizens individually and make you jump through all kinds of hoops, you know, and levy penalties against you, so that 100 years later, under the Federal Reserve System and the IRS, the average American has no wealth whatsoever.
Mm.
I mean, the recent reports show that the average American citizen, black or white, could not handle a $500 emergency. That's above their head. If it was more than $500, hey, they're drowning. They're drowning in debt. Now, the third institution that was created, along with the Federal Reserve Bank and the IRS on the money side, of course, was the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a completely unconstitutional agency. Again, it's a private-owned corporation. And under the American Constitution, of course, there is no higher law officer than the county sheriff. See, the county sheriff is an elected officer of the law at the county level. And there is no law that is higher than the county level in terms of law enforcement officers. I don't mean there aren't courts that are higher than county courts, but there's no law enforcement military force, police force, in other words, higher than the county, much less at the national level, is forbidden by the United States the United States Constitution for there to be a national police force. And the reason for that is obvious. If the president of the United States has at his disposal a national police force, well, then they become his sick dogs. He can sick law enforcement on anybody that he doesn't like. And they're just employees. They're just going to follow instructions. They're going to do what they're told to do. So for the past 100 years, the point I was making is that these are the three seeds of destruction of America. You have a national police force that has now gone berserk. So they're even indicting former presidents of the United States, raiding the home, the residence of a former president of the United States. Well, if they can do that and get away with that and cart away documents, you see, well, if they can get away with that, then what can't they get away with? If they can censor a former president of the United States, or even when he was president, shut the president's mouth, tell the president, shut up. And now look what happened just the other day, Brother Joshua. Here, the FBI has arrested 4 so-called Black militants down in Florida. The African People's Socialist Party, that's what they call themselves. The African People's Socialist Party in, I think they're in Jacksonville, Florida. No, I'm sorry, St. Petersburg, Florida. St. Petersburg, Florida. Arrested them. What were they guilty of, or what were they charged with? The Justice Department said they were being arrested and held because they expressed views that were supportive of Russia in terms of the war in Ukraine. That they reported stories of what was taking place in Ukraine that was not the same as the government narrative of what is allegedly taking place in Ukraine. And so they charged these people with being foreign agents of the Russian government and said that they were trying to interfere in American elections. Well, now, the day that this happened, this indictment, was the, I think the 35th anniversary of the bombing of Waco, Texas. So you might be too young to remember that. But they were just a religious group. They had their own viewpoint.
Yes, sir.
They were Americans, and that in America you had religious freedom, that you could worship God any way you wanted to. That was the story that I got when I was a school child. They said that's why they came over from Europe. It wasn't to murder all the Indians. That's not why they came. It wasn't to exploit the gold and the silver. They didn't come over here to take the oil. They didn't come over here to kill all the buffalo. They didn't come over here to set up slave plantations. No, what they told us in school was they came over here to worship Jesus. And so they came all the way over here to worship Jesus, and so they could be righteous people and not like the wicked people over there in Europe. See, that's what they told me. They said George Washington never told a lie, you know, and you know they wouldn't lie about a thing like that. So what I'm saying is that the Branch Dravidians, that's what they were called. See, they believed in the American dream. Now, to tell you the truth, Brother Joshua, I don't know what they believed in. I don't know what kind of religious theology they had, but according to the American Constitution, you have a right to believe anything you want, or nothing at all if you don't want to. Now, it's also interesting that around the same date, see, that was the Branch Dravidians down in Waco, Texas. They burned them alive. And some people say it was actually a satanic ritual. You see, because it was done by the Justice Department when Bill Clinton was president and Janet Reno was his attorney general. And to a lot of people, it looked like one of these pagan ritual sacrifice of humans in a burning inferno. And then before then, see, I know you don't remember this. Remember, there was a group in Philadelphia called Africa. Yeah, they were called Africa. And all of the people that were members of that group, they took Africa as their last name. I think the founder was John Africa. And there was everybody was Africa. Everybody's Africa. And they call them a cult. They call them a black militant nationalist cult. And they were nonconformists, and they had dreadlocks. And believe it or not, back in the day, see, people with dreadlocks were considered to be some kind of a subhuman, some type of they love Bob Marley now. They love Bob Marley on the record. But if you actually walked into a store or a mall and you had dreadlocks, or you wanted to drive a car with dreadlocks, that the police will pull you over in a minute. Now you have a whole cult of people in Philadelphia. They call themselves the Move organization.
Yes, sir.
And they thought that they were in America too, where they could be what they wanted to be. That they could be as black as they wanted to be. If they wanted to be African, they could be African. If they wanted to grow their hair out in dreadlocks, they could do that. That's what they thought. And plus, they were in the city of brotherly love, right? And then at the time, I know they felt very secure because they had just elected, I believe, the first black mayor of Philadelphia, Wilson Good. And so Wilson Good was the one that dropped the bomb on Move. See, it wasn't a white mayor. It wasn't a white racist Italian or a white racist, Irishman. There wasn't nothing like that. Wasn't no white Anglo-Saxon Protestant that dropped the bomb on the African movement. No, it was a black mayor. And when we spoke to him about that, he was happy to have done it, and he said he would do it again. So I'm bringing that up. I'm bringing all of that up because it throws a light on what has happened in the past and what is likely to happen in the future as we go forward.
Yes, sir.
Now, how long have we been on the air? For about 30 minutes. To the so-called American Negroes in Detroit. See, they were so disappointed that he did that because the British and the Americans and their Turkish or Ottoman allies had just conquered Islam, so they thought. See, who's in the news nowadays? Saudi Arabia, the kingdom, they say the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Well, when in the history of Islam has there ever been a king? The king of Islam was Allah himself. So then who set up a kingdom of Saudi Arabia where they got a king? And he tried to make himself the king of Islam, but got voted down. But he was set up as the king of Saudi Arabia over the holy cities of Mecca and Arabia by the British. Go look it up. In 1931, the British agent John Philby, the British agent, can you still hear?
Yes, sir. I'm right here with you.
Yeah, because a phone call came through,
Okay,
and let me. I got somebody's at my door.
Okay, yes, sir. I'll do the commercial break while you gone. Go ahead, Dr. Alim. You did a great job. Thank you, everyone who's watching. I mean, my goodness, I knew it's been a minute since we heard from Dr. Alim, and he's giving us some powerful information. I'm going to read all of you all's comments, and I'm going to take the questions as well. We have a quick 60-second commercial break for all of the sponsors of the People's Podcast. Every anonymous donation on the Cash App, every like, share, and subscription, we are eternally grateful for.
A camera and a drone. He does television and film editing. Please reach out to him if you need any of those services. Sister Miriam's ABC I Love Me, children's book and coloring book, and now Spanish book. All three available on Amazon.com. Sister Naima's Stay on Point Dance Academy, LLC. She teaches ballet virtually to young girls all across the country, right here in the studios of Atlanta, Georgia. Brother Kenneth's Bow Tie Maker Extraordinaire. He'll ship you bow ties anywhere across the nation. Dr. Henry Carter's King Henry Turkey Legs, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Brother Rashad Muhammad's COVID-19 Disinfected Cleaning Services, out of Chicago. Student Minister Sharif Muhammad's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ, available on adulsharif.com. And lastly, Brother Joshua Muhammad's book, Cleopatra, as well as No Father, No Excuse, both available on Amazon. If you would like to donate.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alim. You're on a roll. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to let you know that you are receiving love from all over the world. People are bearing witness. And thank you all for sending positive energy and love to our brother and great teacher, great minister, and Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad. Yes, sir. Back to you, sir.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And I appreciate all of the love, and I love you back. Now, how much time do we have? I really don't know. I'm just.
Oh, yes, sir. Take your time. Take your time. It's no time. Take your time.
So the great and dreadful day of the Lord means that we have to factor in our thinking the presence of Master Farrakhan Muhammad. See, sometimes we go about our daily affairs, our civic affairs, our collective affairs, as though Master Farrakhan Muhammad doesn't exist. But he does. Now, maybe there are people in somewhere in the world that don't know that, but I doubt that. And the reason I doubt that, there is no one that doesn't know that fact about the presence of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, is because of the work that we have already done. See, we did the work that we were asked to do. And the pinnacle of that work, of course, occurred in 1995 at the Million Man March.
Yes, sir.
When Minister Farrakhan convened the largest public event in the history of the world. And I like to say it was the largest prayer meeting ever convened by any Muslim in the world. And of course, that's only natural because by 1995, who was the best known and most popular Muslim in the entire world, if it wasn't Minister Farrakhan? I mean, there's Muslims all over the world. Everywhere I've been around the world twice. I never was in a country or in a place where there wasn't Muslims. But if you said in China, or if you pick China, say who's the most popular, well-known Muslim in China today? Farrakhan. There's Muslims in the Philippines.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But the most popular and well-known Muslim in the Philippines is not a Filipino. It's Minister Farrakhan. And I know they got a king in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, and Dubai. Oh, they got top-notch Muslims in Nigeria, and Sudan, and all over the world. But you can't name one of them. Name me one. Name me some great sheikh from Africa. I mean, the best well-known sheikh from Africa right now is Sheikh Tajani bin Omar. And why is he the most famous sheikh in Islam in Africa today? Because he was selected by Minister Farrakhan to give the prayer service, the call to prayer, you know, the Fajr prayer.
Yes, sir.
On the mall at the Million Man March. You see, so what I'm saying is that the British and the Americans, the Anglo-Saxon tribe, they have plans to rule the world in league with the other tribe, the ones that call themselves the tribe, the tribe of Israel.
That's a fact.
So this tribal brotherhood, in modern language, they call themselves the Zionist Alliance, the Christian Zionist Alliance. And of course, the Quran spoke of that Christian Zionist Alliance by saying that we as Muslims, we as righteous people, we are not to take the Christians for our friends who are friends with the Jews.
Mm.
And we are not to take as our friends the Jews who are friends with these same Christians.
Mm. Mm.
The Jews and the Christians who are friends of one another are off limits for us.
Mm.
Now, the Christians who are not friends of the Jews, they are closest to us in love and brotherhood, because we love Jesus just as much as they do. And when they find out that we as Muslims revere and love Jesus as much as they do, and they find out that we're not looking for the return of Muhammad, but Muhammad prophesied the return of Imam Isa, Jesus. And we're not enemies to the believing Jews. How could we be enemies to the believing Jews? The Jews of the Torah, how could we be enemies to them? Because they obey the same law that's pretty much the same as our law. We can even eat their same food.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, anytime that you can sit down and have a meal and eat the same food with another people, that's not your enemy. But the Quran warns us about the Christians who are friends with some Jews and some Jews who are friends with Christians, because when you think about that equation, it don't add up.
Mm.
See, if I'm a Christian and I love Jesus, how can I be in love with people who despised and rebuked Jesus? And some say even killed Jesus. And they themselves boast that they killed Jesus, the Messiah, in mockery. So if I'm a Christian, how could I possibly be friends with the ones who killed my Messiah?
Go ahead and teach. Go ahead and teach.
Not if I'm a true Christian. And then if I'm a true Jew, how could I be friends with a Christian and I killed their Messiah?
Mm. Mm.
And how could I say that I'm a Jew and I reject the Messiah that my own Jewish prophets predicted was going to come? And when he showed up, I rejected him. Well, the resolution of that dilemma is very simple. In Revelations, in the book of Revelations, in the gospel, the last book in the gospel, it warns you about those who call themselves Jews, but they're not Jews, but they are of the synagogue of Satan.
Yes, sir.
Now that's a part of the gospel, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, why didn't they mention those who are Christians, who call themselves Christians, but who are not Christians, but are of the church of Satan?
Mm. Mm.
And why didn't they mention the Muslims who call themselves Muslims, but they're not Muslims, but they're of the mosque of Satan? How come they didn't mention that in Revelations?
Mm. Mm.
Well, for the simple reason that when the Gospels were being revealed, Christianity was just getting started. The Christians hadn't had a chance yet to punk out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But now we're 2,000 years into this thing that they like to call Christianity. And we see that the majority of the Christians have punked out on Jesus. And now they're in league with the murderers of Jesus. And just like most of the Jews, the followers of Moses, Bani Israel, we see how they punked out over and over and over and over again. When I say they punked out, I mean they violated the covenant that they had with Almighty God. And they violated it so bad that it had to be taken from them. And it was. See people debating about who are the true children of Israel.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, the true children of Israel are the ones that have the covenant, have the Ark of the Covenant. So as soon as you can locate where the Ark of the Covenant is, then you have the identity of the true children of Israel. Well, it's not hard to find the Ark of the Covenant. It's in a church called the Church of St. Mary, and it's in a city in Ethiopia called Axum. That's where the Ark of the Covenant is. That's since Sheba, Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba,
Yes, sir.
and her son Menelik, they took that ark way back then from Solomon. I mean, I know Solomon's supposed to be so wise, but Sheba outsmarted him. Well, because see, Solomon was dibbling and dabbling in sorcery, black magic. The Quran talks about the two upside down angels in Babylon. See, that's what Solomon was doing. He was trying to build a temple. See, Solomon's temple was built, but not by his people. You just think about those people. See, they like to glorify, like King David was basically like a warlord. He wasn't no architect. Okay, he built a temple. And then Solomon, he wasn't no architect either. He couldn't build no temple, but he was supposed to. He had to. So he enlisted the help of demons, of jinn. So the chief of the jinn was a jinn by the name of Ifrit. And so he was the one that actually was the supervisor that built the King Solomon's temple. But but now when you do things like that, now you like in this world, we know people like entertainers and rappers, and they've made a pact with the devil, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, like Jay-Z, he got a song in praise of Lucifer, right? So this is a Luciferian, this is a satanic worshiper. And a lot of these most famous people, what was Prince all about? You see, he made a pact with the devil. And of course, it was for a certain amount of time, and then he had to be sacrificed. Well, this has a long history. This goes back, like, who was the most famous blues singer that got blues started in America? It was Robert Johnson from Mississippi.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, his famous song, Crossroads with the Devil.
That's right.
He sold his soul to the devil so he could be famous. Well, that just didn't start now. That's going way back. See, and that's what Solomon did. I don't say he sold his soul, but he enlisted the help of demons to further his project. And that contaminated his work. So at the end of his life, you see, he prayed to Allah to destroy his kingdom because it was being led by demons. And rather than allow it to be led by demons, he prayed to Allah, destroy this kingdom, because it's a kingdom of wickedness and demonology. And it was destroyed right after Solomon's death. And that's when his people got rounded up and taken into Babylon, where they learned some more sorcery. See, so that's what we're dealing with. So the Ark of the Covenant, but to get back to the point,
yes, sir,
that properly identifies the people who have it as the true Hebrews, the true children of Israel. They're right there in Ethiopia. You can go talk to them. They'll be happy to talk to you and tell you all about it, how they took the covenant from Solomon and them. So, but now, along the way, see, this demonology has always been the undercurrent to what's taking place.
Yes, sir.
Look at King James. See, everybody knows about the King James version of the Bible, right?
Yes, sir.
You got some Bible-beaten Christians. I mean, they swear by the King James version of the Bible. They don't read no other version of the Bible. And they're not even bothered by the word version. You say, well, how come it's a version of the Bible? Where's the Bible? A version of the Bible is not the Bible. A version of the truth is not the truth. If you want the truth, you want the truth, not a version of the truth. So if you got a version of the Bible, well, that means there must be a real Bible somewhere, but this is not it, it's a version.
Yes, sir.
So it's King James's version. So who was King James of England? in Ireland. Well, if you read his history, you see he did the Bible was not the first book that he wrote and published. It was the most popular one.
Mm.
The first book that he wrote was called Demonology. He wrote a book on demonology. You can buy it on Amazon. Go look it up. It's on. You can buy it. I got a copy on my bookshelf. I didn't read it. I'm scared to read it. I am. I'm scared to read that kind of stuff. But I just have a copy of it, because when you tell people who believe in the King James version of the Bible that this same King James, before he wrote the Bible, he wrote about 150-page book on demonology, on how to cast spells and hypnotize people and put them in a trance. You see? Well, then that's what he put into the Bible. See, when you write a book, what do you have to do? When you write anything, what do you have to do? When you write your name, or when you write a word, what must you do?
Spell it out.
You have to spell it. And what does spell mean? When you cast a spell, it's magic.
Yes, sir.
So that's why Master Fard Muhammad, you see, one of the first things that he warned us of was don't read that poison book. He said, leave that poison book alone. Leave that poison book alone. Well, he must have known about King James. See, being Master Fard Muhammad, you would think he probably did know that King James, before he wrote that Bible, he wrote a book called Demonology. And the way I was thinking about it, I might not be right, but the way I was thinking about it, the reason why he didn't mention that fact, that King James had written a book on demonology, you know what we would have done if we had found out about that? We would have gone and got that book.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
we'd
sir.
have been reading the book about demonology instead of reading what he wanted us to read. And he told us don't read the Bible, because the Bible is just as bad as the book on demonology. That King James version of the Bible came from a book of demonology. Now, the question I had, if I could bring King James back and I could interview him, who taught you demonology? It must have been a demon, right? I mean, well, wait a minute now. If King Solomon had a real temple, then it must be real demons that built a real temple, because people was in it. They were walking around in it. He was sitting on the throne. It was a real place. It was so real, it had to be destroyed. But you have a lot of people, they don't actually believe in the jinn. They don't believe in demons. They don't believe in that kind of stuff. You see, they say, get real. See, there's some people out there right now, Brother Job, they say, Dr. Alim getting spooky now. He's spooky. He talking about demons. Well, then what was King James writing about there? If this is all spook, make believe that don't exist, then he put you in slavery. Then he found a town called Jamestown and bring you to it and put you in slavery, and you've been in slavery ever since. So now look at this. Now, see, I'm a doctor. So when I heard it said in the mosque that Master Fard Muhammad called the Bible a poison book and leave it alone, and then the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in the back of Message to the Black Man, see, he has a guide there. See, these are the only points in the Bible that you can use safely. Then he has the points in the Quran too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Here's what I want you to use, in the resurrection of the dead, and leave that other part alone. See, well, you know how children are. You tell them don't go in the cookie jar, don't go in the closet, don't go in that room. That's the first thing they're gonna do. They're gonna go in it. So that's how we are, being like children. Master Fard Muhammad told us straight out, stay away from it. And the very thing he told us to stay away from, that's what we jump into, right?
Yes,
so
sir.
as a doctor, I'm saying, now wait a minute, why would he call it poison? See, that's a very specific word, poison. He didn't say it was just false. He didn't say it was, this, that, or that. He said it's a poison book. And I'm like a doctor. I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Well, what does poison do to people? I'm trying to think, what kind of poisonous effect is in the poison book? And then I started looking at people who read the Bible a lot. I said, I'll just watch it. I'll see what happens to them. And you know what I found out? People that read the Bible a whole lot and study the Bible, get all into the Bible, they forget who they are. That's the main thing. They forget who they are. And they start thinking that there's somebody in that book. Yeah, they do. They start reading about King David, they think they King David. They start reading about Noah, they think they Noah. They start reading about Jesus, they think they Jesus. Like some people now like that, they have come up to me, Brother Joshua. They say, Brother Alim, you one of the disciples just like Jesus, had a disciple named Luke, and he was a doctor just like you. I said, you better get out of my face. You insulting me. So what if Luke was a physician? What was the quality of a physician back in the year zero? That's when you're talking about 2023 years ago. What kind of physician was walking around on the earth 2023 years ago? I mean, come on now. If you could bring Luke into this room with me right now, would he teach me or would I teach him?
Go ahead and teach. Yes,
would he
sir.
be my student or would I be his student? You come over talking about, you just like Luke. The hell I am. You're insulting me. Those were primitive people back then. They were dusty and dirty and smelly. They didn't hardly know nothing about nothing. I mean, with all due respect now.
Yes, sir. Yes.
With all due respect. But let's be real about it. You see, so when we as a people, when we compare ourselves to these dirty, dusty people, these old ignorant people in the past that we read about, and they wrote some glorified stories. See, now look at the Old Testament. We're talking about the New Testament. Who wrote those Old Testament stories? These people claim that they Jews, and they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Well, that's where those stories came from. Why were you out in the wilderness for 40 years? You didn't have no home for 40 years? Come on, man. So here you out there like a bunch of gypsies in the wilderness, sitting around a campfire at night telling stories, telling lies about what you did, and it was a giant and this and that. Come on, man. So it's like that song they had on Broadway. They said the things you was liable to read in your Bible, it ain't necessarily so. They said Methuselah was 900 years. They said Methuselah lived 900 years. But who calls that living when no guy would give in to a man that's been living 900 years?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They said Jonah lived in a whale. He made his home in that fish's abdomen. But it ain't necessarily so.
Yes, sir.
You see, so that's what we have been, I'm not making mockery of the revealed scriptures of God. We as Muslims, we believe in God. We believe in the prophets of God, and we believe in what was revealed to the prophets. But we don't believe all them stories that was told by liars and the rejectors of the prophets as being holy writ. No. We got to look carefully into these stories that have been written by people that love to tell tall tales. See, these same people that wrote that Old Testament Bible, they're the same people that write these Hollywood movies.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A whole bunch of action adventure movies, tall tales, telling lies, about things that never were, never will be. Just all a bunch of make-believe magic. And see, so that's why Master Farrakhan Muhammad warned us against that poison book, because just like some people, they go to the movies and the next thing they know, they think they're Batman. They do. They go crazy. Yeah, here, brother, he goes see a gangster rap movie, and he come out the movie, now he's a gangster. You see? I mean, the people are so gullible and so easily led astray. And so we were warned against these things. We were warned against the television. See, when I came in the Nation of Islam, it almost broke my heart. You couldn't watch television. Muslims couldn't watch television.
Mm.
You could watch the news, but that was only a half hour.
Mm.
But you couldn't watch your stories.
Mm. Mm.
You couldn't watch no movies. You couldn't even go to the movies. Because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, why would you invite the devil into your living room to teach your children? Well, what have we done? We have invited the devil into our living room, and the devil has taught our children well. So now your son thinks he's your daughter.
Mm.
Your girl thinks she's a boy. You see, we were told to take our children out of the educational system of America. And so now that's become a freak show. You see, and so where are our youth? So the point that I was making before, and maybe we can kind of wind this up. See, the Anglo-Saxon tribe and the Hebrew tribe are so disappointed because, see, they have the majority of the Jewish people are good people, but they've been hoodwinked by the ones that's not. See, when I was saying before that they created 3 agencies in 1913, actually it was 4. The 4th one was the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
See, that's the 4th one.
Mm.
See, so now people have attacked the Anti-Defamation League. But you know what that's like? That's like your neighbor having a guard dog and you attacking the guard dog.
Mm.
No, no, no. The guard dog is only guarding who's in the house. So they tell you right up front, if you go to their website or go down to headquarters right here in Washington, D.C., we paid them plenty of visits before. Yeah, your father, right down there. See, right there up on 15th Street, I think, used to be. Anyhow, they say the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith.
Mm.
Who's B'nai B'rith? That's who owns the Anti-Defamation League.
Mm.
See, if you talk to, say, the Jewish people in Brooklyn, the Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn and other places around the country. See, when I lived in New York, I lived in Muncie, New York, among the Orthodox Jews.
Mm.
I didn't have no trouble with them, and they didn't have no trouble with me. You see, but if you talk to them about the Anti-Defamation League, they start looking. Because the good Jews, and that's 99% of them, probably 95% of them, they know the Anti-Defamation League is a bunch of gangsters.
Mm.
That's what they are. They're just gangsters. Those are the gangsters. And they're real gangsters. They will kill you.
Mm. Mm.
If you're a Jewish merchant, you got a store, a business, and you don't go along with the ADL, yeah, they will come in and burn you down. They will put you in line just like any mafia gangsters will do. That's what the ADL is.
Mm.
Bunch of gangsters, a bunch of murderers, a bunch of thieves, deceivers. See, just like the Italian mafia. Well, that's just the military arm of the Vatican. See, so the Jews have a military arm called the Anti-Defamation League. The Roman Catholics, they got a military arm in 2 branches, the Jesuits, and then they needed the mafia over here because, see, when they broke away for religious freedom from England and from Europe,
yes, sir.
The Catholics came over to North America, the Vatican lost control of them.
Mm.
So they had to create the mafia in America to control the Catholics in America, just like B'nai B'rith had to be created to control the Jews. You see? Now, what about the Muslims? Well, now you come to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. See, that sounds like a nice name, right? The Muslim Brotherhood. They sound like nice brothers, you know, eating bean pie and all that. Yeah, they're nice brothers, wear bow ties. Yeah, they're nice brothers. except they're not.
Mhm.
See, just like we were talking about the Jews who are not Jews, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Now we're talking about the Christians who are not Christians, but they are of the church of Satan. Go look at the Godfather movie at those Christians.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Those
Yes,
are
sir.
Christians. And among the Muslims, you have the same thing. See, Islam has a bloody reputation among some people. They say Islam was spread by the sword. That's what they say.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, some of them Muslims that are not Muslims, they did do that. And they call them Wahhabis. They call them Salafis. You see, those are British Muslims. So here's homework for people, especially anybody that is in the ministry class or wants to be in the ministry class or who really wants to understand Islam or anybody who really wants to understand the mission of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Here's a book that you have to read, and it's available online for free. It's called The Confessions of a British Spy. The Memoirs of Mr. Hempher, spelled Hempher. The Confessions of a British Spy. The Memoirs of Mr. Hempher. And Hempher was a British agent. We're going back 250 years. He was working out of the British Colonial Office. And he was made to be fluent in Persian, Arabic, and Turkish. And he was sent first into the Ottoman Empire. That was the Muslim empire at that time.
Yes, sir.
He was sent to Istanbul, Baghdad, all of those places. And he got in good with all of the Muslims. And then he reported back to the, this took years now. This was over years. Then he reported back to the British Colonial Office his findings on Islam because they were out to conquer Islam. And they had conquered most of the other parts of the world, but they couldn't get Islam. They couldn't crack the Islamic nut. And so Hempher's report was necessary for the British Colonial Office to figure out how they could conquer Islam. And so the problem was, they said that no matter how bad things got in the Islamic world, in the Islamic community, and even if people were unjust to one another, and they were complaining to high heaven, you couldn't get a Muslim to kill a fellow Muslim. They would always try to work it out. And so what they had to do was they had to make a change in Islam that would allow a Muslim to kill another Muslim. See, back in the day in the nation, it was obvious against the law for a Muslim to raise his hand to strike another Muslim, whether it's your wife or not. You better not strike another Muslim. And if a Muslim struck you, he was going to be put out of the nation. But guess what? If you struck back, you're going to be put out too. Because Muslims did not fight Muslims. Muslims did not kill Muslims. We might disagree, but we would never become disagreeable. To the point of murdering a Muslim, murdering another Muslim, just because somebody disagrees about what some verse in the Quran might mean. No. Allah is the judge.
Yes, sir.
We made different. See? So Hempher made his report, and so they concocted a new form of Islam. And they say, here's what we'll latch on to. In Islam, there's a strict prohibition against shirk. You know what shirk means?
Yes, sir.
Associating anything with Allah. So they said, Hempher said, well, most of the Muslim people are illiterate. They don't read. But every village, every town, every city, every community has a sheikh or a community of sheikhs. And these sheikhs are scholars. And they read and they recite the Quran and they teach the people and they give guidance and counseling so that the community prospers. And even though the majority of people are not educated, they're well guided by their scholars. So here's what the British decided to do. They sent Hemper back into the Holy Land among the Muslims, and he recruited a stooge, and they made an interpretation that anybody, say for example, if somebody died, say a great sheikh died, and there was a funeral, and if somebody prayed at the gravesite, shirk, offered his head. So then people became afraid to pray. Because if you pray at the wrong time with the wrong, somebody's watching you with a sword, and they're going to say, oh, shirk, and off with your head. Then the other thing that the British did, they sent assassins in among the Muslims to find out who are the true sheikhs. Who are the ones that have the true deen? Who are the ones that have the true sunnah of the prophet? Who are the ones that have the true interpretation of Islam? They murdered them. So over a period of generations, you had a decimation of the scholarship of Islam. And so then you had a mass of Muslims devoid of scholarship who could then be misled into this new form of Islam that they now call Wahhabism or Salafism, and these different names. And these are the people like you see in ISIS, in these so-called terrorist groups, mindless people. They call themselves Muslims, but they don't know the first thing about Islam. And all they know how to do is kill somebody in the name of Islam. And of course, that's giving Islam a bad name, because Islam means peace. It has nothing to do with that. So now here, let me bring this to a climax, or not a climax, to a close. See, when did all of this take place? Well, here's another homework assignment.
Yes, sir.
Get the book, The Confessions of a British Spy, and at the same time, go look at a movie. I don't normally tell people to watch movies, but you can actually watch this one for free, I think. It stars Peter O'Toole, and it's called Lawrence of Arabia. Now there's a book too, by the same name. The movie is based on a book, but the movie is actually very, very good. It's historically accurate. And it shows you the intrigues that took place of how the British were able to take over Islam after 250 years of intrigues, and how General Allenby crossed the bridge of the Jordan River into Jerusalem in 1914, and announcing the end of the Crusades, because those who had been expelled from the Holy Land from the time of Solomon had finally fought their way back into the Holy Land and took over the holy city of Jerusalem, where they could set up their settler empire, pretending to be the descendants of those original children of Israel, pretending to be the descendants of the original Christians, pretending to be real Muslims in some cases, but they are not. They are the synagogue, they are of the church, they are the mosque of Satan. And so I'm so glad that I know who God is. I thank Allah, who came to us in the person of Master Fawad Muhammad, for making himself known.
Yes, sir.
Now, when did he come? He came at the very time that the British were taking over Mecca. They put King Saud on the throne in 1931. There was no such thing as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia before 1931. They made that up. They're still making it up. And so the British, as I said earlier, the Anglo-Saxons, the Americans, and the phony Jews, they were so disappointed. They thought they had taken over Islam and conquered it because they occupied Mecca and Medina and controlled the holy places. But guess what? Somebody escaped. Master Fawad Muhammad escaped with the true Islam, the original Islam, the uncontaminated Islam, undefiled Islam.
Yes, sir.
And he brought it out of Saudi Arabia and placed it into the most unlikely place that the enemy would never think to look to find it in.
Go ahead, teach.
He placed it with us. And so that lays a heavy responsibility on us. You see, those of us who call ourselves followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because Allah in the person of Master Fawad Muhammad bequeathed to us. He made us his beneficiaries.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Of his trust. While the enemy was destroying the old world of Islam, pulverizing it. Go look at Mecca today. They got a tower just like the Big Ben Tower in London. Only it's bigger than the Big Ben in London. And that's the British letting you know who's in charge here, what time it is in Mecca.
Yes, sir.
It's according to Big Ben, not according to your Allah. But see, man plans and Allah plans. And Allah is the best of planners. So what is the heavy responsibility that lays upon our shoulders? True Islam has been deposited on us and with us. And nowhere else in the world is the true original Islam. Not this made up religiosity called Islam. But before Islam was called Islam, before Islam had a name, it was the nature of us in which we are created. And there's no altering Allah's creation. And back to the tribal thing. Oh, let the Anglo-Saxons do what they want to do. Let the Hebrew tribe do what they want to do. But we got a tribal designation too. We are of the tribe of Shabazz. We are those that have existed from the beginning.
Yes, sir.
We are those that have no birth record. We have no death record in store for us. We are those that cannot be destroyed nor conquered. Although you tried your best, yet you have failed. And so I'll just leave it right there. You see, so we have to take what we have been given very seriously because the entire future of Islam rests with us. See, that's why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said he didn't give 2 cents for Muslim scholarship. Because Muslim scholarship is not Muslim scholarship. Muslim scholarship is British scholarship. That includes the Iranians. Who was it that brought Imam Khomeini out of obscurity? It was the British Broadcasting Company. They made Ayatollah Khomeini famous because they wanted to get rid of the Shah for their own reasons. You see, and then have a schism in Islam going between the Sunnis and the Shias, you see? And that's what's been going on, you know, these last 40 years.
Yes, sir.
They declared a war on terrorism. Well, that term terrorism, war on terrorism, that was a term invented by the Israeli Mossad. Go, you can't even define what a terrorist is. There's no definition for terrorism. So if you're having a war against something that you don't even know the definition of, well, then you're just, again, what does the Mossad rule by? They say they wage war by deception. So you've been deceived in your whole mind. And so the whole world has been taken to war, and a war against terrorism or against terrorists. Well, what are they terrified of? Well, we know the answer to that question. You're terrified of the God that is with us. And you're trying to act so terrible yourself to make us afraid of you. But we know who to be afraid of.
That's right. That's right.
And it's not you. We're afraid of the God who came to save us. We're afraid of his messenger.
Yes, sir.
We're afraid to go contrary to what he told us. That's what we're afraid of. We're not afraid of you. I know as a young Muslim, one of the things that impressed me about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a statement that he made one time. He said, if you're afraid, get behind me, because I am not afraid. He said, I'm not asking you to take the point. Allah had put me out front, and he had made me unafraid. So get behind me if you're afraid.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You see, so that's where I always try to stay, behind the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because this is a terrible enemy. And there's terrible things that he can do. He got 336 bioweapons laboratories. He got thousands of nuclear bombs. He got nuclear submarines. He got all this stuff. And the only thing we got is God. Allah is sufficient. Allah is sufficient. So I'll just stop there. And I don't know if well, I guess, what, about an hour and a half.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and so I don't know if there's any questions or comments, but that's what I had on my heart to say. And it's just a reminder to us that Master Fard Muhammad is in the world. And behind the scenes, they talk about the front story, then the back story, the back narrative. Well, behind all of the scenes that are taking place in the East and the West, the North and the South, is the presence of God in this world. And he's bringing down the world that we have known, and he's bringing up a new one. So that's why it is a great and a dreadful day. And you just have to decide. See, the reason why it's a judgment day, see, not the big period of judgment of 100 years or so, but the moment of judgment. See, it comes down to each and every one of you and me. See, each one of us as individuals, we have a seat of judgment. It's right here. It's a seat of judgment. So now, based on everything that we know about, each one of us individually has to decide, based on everything that we have heard, everything that we have seen, everything that we have experienced in our lifetime, we have to decide whether this is a great day for us or a dreadful one. See, that's our judgment. That's going to be according to our judgment. That's going to be our viewpoint. That's how we see things. See, so that's why I'm emphasizing the presence of the Savior.
Yes, sir.
Master Fard Muhammad, because if you keep that in mind, then you recognize that through the doom and the gloom and the collapse of this society, hey, this is a great day for us. Hey, I ain't sad. They tell me what's going on in Europe. There's a calamity over there. It's terrible. Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Okay, I'm not sad. But now if I'm bought into that, if I'm tied into it, you see, if I'm indebted to it, then that collapse is my collapse. See, there was a book called The Fall of America.
Yes, sir.
Well, if I'm tied into America, if I didn't do what the Lord said, he says, separate. Well, suppose I didn't. Well, then I'm praying to the Lord, don't kill America so quick. Keep her here just a little bit longer, Lord, because I'm still with her. Even though we say a prayer, thee alone.
Come on, man.
Do we serve on our way to work to serve somebody else? And we think God doesn't notice our open hypocrisy. So the time of judgment is collective, but it's also individual with each and every one of us. We decide our own fate. We sentence our own selves either to life or death, depending on how we judge.
Yes, sir.
And so let us judge correctly based on the best that we know and not the evil, corrupt lessons that we were taught by our open enemy. Let's put away those things, those negative things that make us feel bad, make us feel bad within and create bad thoughts, bad behaviors, bad relationships, bad outcomes. But let's jump over here on the other side. Like Jesus told those people, they was fishing on the wrong side of the boat. There wasn't nothing wrong with fishing, but you got to be on the right side of the boat. So that's where we need to be today. Get on the right side of the boat. cast your net and pull up the benefits, the bounty, the abundance that God wants to give to you. But he can't give it to you when you're wrapped up with the devil. And he's not going to bless you through the devil. He's not going to make the devil treat you better. He's not going to make the devil pay you more money. He's going to make the devil pay you less money. So I'll stop there. I don't know when to stop. So thank you, Brother Joshua. I've enjoyed myself on a Sunday afternoon.
Yes, sir.
It was cloudy when we started. It looked like the sun's trying to come back out.
All praise due to Allah. And Dr. Alim, I'm telling you, receiving love all over the world. I want to thank you. I'll reach out to you off after this so we can discuss a part 2, because we got to get another part because you've been on before. But this is powerful. Thank you to Brother Elijah Muhammad. Thank you to my sisters Miriam, Naima, Brother Saladin, Sister Aisha Kareem. She says she's going to be your patient out of Chester, Pennsylvania. She thanks you. Sister Courtney, Sister Sandra, she's been in since the beginning. Brother, everybody who's watched the People's Podcast show love. Brother Vincent, people saying that's right, teach Dr. Sister Rosie. Just everybody who's watched and continues to show love to the People's Podcast and Dr. Alim. This has been an honor. We've been truly fed. Sister Maya Abdul Rahman, just people all over the world. We're gonna put this on YouTube.
Wow.
Yes, sir, we're gonna put this on YouTube, sir. This means so much to me. Once again, on behalf of myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we thank Allah for you. Thank Allah for your work over the decades. And I was sharing with people. It's on YouTube if you all want to see. I'll be chopping it up on Facebook and YouTube to see Dr. Alim defending. It was 1995 on a talk show, but he was defending the Nation of Islam against the slander about Malcolm X. And I just looked at it. I said, this man has been, this is the doctor I've been knowing, he's known me my whole life. But to see you always representing in such a convicted, charismatic way the teachings of Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we thank you and we thank Allah for you. Shout out to your son Kush as well. Tell him he's doing great things and we continue to support him and send love his way as well. This is Joshua Leonard Muhammad signing off with the People's Podcast. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum salam.
Yes, sir.